everyone, my name is Melissa Furness. I am, again, an artist and professor, and I'm here to show you how to make your very own handmade hardbound book. The book I'm going to be producing is going to be something like this. You can make your book any size that you like, and this is a type of book that I also often teach my students how to produce. So this is one that I've got ready to go to make some wonderful drawings in this spring. So I'm going to start by going over all of the different materials that you're going to need to get together before you start to produce the book. So first off, you see this lovely cover that I have going on here. That was actually done through screen printing. I also teach screen printing when I'm at the university. And this is basically a sort of monotype freehand style screen printing, super easy to do. You can also use different types of decorative paper like these. So these are the ones that we're going to be working with today. The other thing that you need is what's called book cloth. It looks like this. It also has a bit of paper on the back. You can make your own book cloth and back it yourself with some sort of paste, but it does have that little bit of paper backing to give it a bit of stiffness and so that the glue also does not soak through when you glue it up. So that would be for this part and also for the foredge. Okay. So you can see here pretty much everything that I'm going to be using. Well, this is a thicker printmaking paper that we use. You have cardboard, which I'll show you how to utilize later on when we're sewing up the book. This is an awl, also for sewing, punching holes in the book so that we're able to sew it together. A curved needle. This is particularly handy when you're doing multiple signatures of your book. So you can order these online. You can also find them like at Michael's. You want a waxed thread, you can buy thread that's already waxed, but you can also just buy beeswax and wax your thread yourself. A linen thread that is a little bit stronger, thicker kind of thread, so it's not going to break when you have the paper there creased on the binding. You need also scissors, X-Acto knife, handy for cutting things, measuring things, along with your ruler, a pencil, which is one thing I don't have there, but an eraser. Your fresh X-Acto blades are very handy. This is a bit of twine, which we'll use for the spine. A loose weave fabric. You just need one bit of this, and this is going to help you to adhere the cover to the pages that you're going to be sewing together. This is the book board itself. It's sometimes called Davy's board. You want a little bit of a thicker board so it's a durable cover. And then you have whatever kind of paper that you want to use, and we'll be preparing this, cutting this up shortly. So I tend to get it in really large sheets, and then I can make whatever size of book that I would like to produce. Wax paper is helpful for your gluing. Your PVA, a neutral pH adhesive. You can also use methyl cellulose and mix it with water, which is kind of like a wheat paste, I suppose. It's a little bit thinner. But for me, I just decide to buy the one aspect of glue and then mix it with a little bit of water so it's easier to spread around on my book. And you can see here that I have a kind of array of different types of sizes of brushes. And then you have also your cutting mat over this way. The other couple of things I didn't mention were a basic pencil. Mechanical pencil works great. And then you need a couple pieces of mat board, or you can also use a little bit more of a flexible cardstock paper for the binding as well. One piece of mat board is going to help you measure out your holes when you do your sewing. And so now we can get started. One thing that I did do is start a shopping cart or shopping list on blick.com to help you purchase materials if you would like to produce this book along with me. Okay, hey everyone. I'm here to show you where the supply list that I have created is for you online. It's at the Blick Art Materials website. So you go over to the side menu of the Blick site, and it says there for educators. Click the down arrow, and there it says Blick U.
That will then take you to a window that says course supply lists. You want to go down to where it says students and find your Blick Use course supply list here. So you click on that, and the state you select is Colorado, and then the University of Colorado, Denver. Do a search, and then at the top there you see bookmaking. Don't worry about the course number itself, but then that will take you to the list of items that I've placed there for you. So at the top you see book cloth, you see PVA, waxed thread, the loose weave fabric, and then if there's something that you don't recognize, you can just click on it for an image. There's the curved needles, the binder's board, and all bone folder, crescent board. If there's something that's not listed on there, or if it's like back ordered, you can try to find it somewhere else or find a different version of it online, no problem. X-Acto knife, value brushes, some drawing paper or any kind of paper that you want to use to put in your book. Lenox paper is actually a good quality, sort of economy priced paper. Also, the Duralar matte, that is the matte acetate for the overlays that I use in my books. You can choose to purchase that or not. A ruler, pencils, eraser, sharpener. Also a cardstock if you want a little bit more flexible spine. So these are all items that you would get specifically from an art materials store. And then there's some other items that you'll find that you also need, like wax paper, scissors, some containers probably for glue, perhaps a mat cutting area, but that you can use cardboard for that as well. So you'll see as we produce the book some of the other materials that you need, but these are the things you would need to special order.
Okay, everyone, so now we're going to get started. The first thing we need to do is to prepare our paper. I have some bookboard that I've already cut. When you purchase bookboard, it's actually quite difficult to cut through the board. So what you can do to cut that board to help you out, you lay the ruler down and then you use your X-Acto blade, and you really have to take and do multiple strikes with your razor blade and be patient with it until you get all the way through the board. That's really the only easy way to do it at home, unless you have some other kind of cutting board device. But this worked well for me. This is the size of the book that I'm going to produce today. It's going to be horizontal. Like I said, you can make any size of book that you like. It's just you have to think about your measurements and how they would be adjusted according to what size you choose to produce. So these pieces of bookboard are actually 10 3/4 inch by 8 3/4 inch. So in order to create my text block, you can see from this book here, if you look inside, the text block is a little bit longer than the bookboard itself on this side. So you have to think about the fact that it's going to sit within this spine. So the size of my actual bookboard here is 10 1/4 by 9 inches. And what I want to do is cut the size of my paper. I want my text block to actually be a little bit of a different size than that so that it fits nicely into the book. So the size of my text block that I want to produce and prepare paper for is going to be 10.5 by 8 3/4 inches. So in order to create the different sections of the pages, I do want the paper to fold in half, so that means I need to make sort of the length longer so that then I fold it in half to create that section of the book. So what size that will be for me 21 inches by 8 3/4 inches. And again, a reminder, depending on what size of book that you are producing, you can vary that size according to what size your bookboards are. But essentially, what I'm doing is creating a text block that is 1/8 of an inch in on the top and the bottom here, and then about 1/8 of an inch or so from the outer edge. and then that extends this way a little bit and sits within the spine, like you see happening with this. Like the text block starts out here and ends here. We have it inside the edges of the book board as well, a little bit. So now I'm going to start measuring out my paper, and the size of these larger sheets of paper that I've ordered are 26 inches by 40 inches. So I want to see how many sheets of book paper I can get out of these larger sheets. So since my height of my book is 8 3/4, I want to start by measuring that size on my paper. And then I know since the length is 26, I'm gonna have no problem, and I can trim those down later. So 8 3/4 here on my ruler, I really just make little tick marks to measure, like this. So I do several across to make sure that when I put my ruler down, it's going to be good and straight, and then I can make my cuts with my X-Acto knife. So I have 3 across, I might do 4 there. I've got my cutting mat down below, and then you can grab your X-Acto knife, make sure you've got a good fresh blade so that you get a nice cut. Put your ruler down across those little divot marks that you made with your pencil, and just drag your X-Acto blade across the edge of your ruler until you get all the way across your paper. And so if your ruler's a little bit small, it's okay, just move it down. You've got those little tick marks that you made that you can use to still line it up. So here I have one sheet. This is 8 3/4 inch height for me, and then 26 inch length. I'm not going to trim the length just yet. I'm first going to create the individual long pages, fold them in half, and then trim them later so that they all line up nicely with my book. So that pretty much is the paper preparation process. Again, like I mentioned with your book board, be patient with yourself and try to make a nice clean cut. If it's not perfect, you can also sometimes take a little bit of sandpaper on the edge of the book board and just sand it a little bit to smooth it out in case you have an accidental rough edge. And then that will get everything ready to go.
So as you are cutting your paper, I find that just preparing your pages and your book board and everything takes a good bit of time. So what I did was to give you another little video you can watch while you're cutting your paper called Sketchbook Development and Overview, in which I give you a little bit of a view of all the sketchbooks that I've produced with students, and also even from my younger years, to give you a little bit of entertainment while you're cutting your paper.
Hello everyone, now that we have cut the width of our paper, we can now think about the length. What I have here is 3 sheets of paper for each section of a book that I'm going to produce. So I want to just double check to make sure that I've got 3 pages per each section that I'm planning on. If I have too many like I have here, I'm going to maybe pull one out. So what I want to do now is figure out the length. So this length is too long. It's 26 inches and I want it to be 21. Sometimes what I do is I'll fold the book pages first and then create the length. But what I've decided is to make it a little bit easier for you rather than trying to cut through our X-Acto knife with multiple layers of paper, is to just measure it now ahead of time. And what I kind of like actually with some books, like this one is a flat edge, some of them create more of a rougher edge that simulates the deckled edge of a fresh sheet of handmade paper, which is a nice quality. So it's interesting to see that on the foredge of the book. So I'm going to try to tear the paper so that I create that kind of effect and measure accordingly. So I want 21 inches and I'll want to tear off a little bit of each end. So if I have 26, I have to cut off 2.5 inches basically from each side. So I'll make my little pencil marks on each end at 2.5 and do that multiple times. And once I do this once, I can just stack up a number of sheets of paper and do them, you know, not necessarily all at once, but perhaps in thirds, like a third of the number of sheets of paper that I have, or basically 2 sections at a time that I can line up and then just pair them together. So I'll put this stack underneath as well, make sure they're stacked up well, grab my ruler, and then I'm going to lay it along the edge where I had put those little pencil marks. And then I'm just going to hold that down flat with one hand, tightly, and then just go ahead and tear each sheet individually until I get through all 6 of the stack that I put here. I'll do that on this end. And then flip it over and do the other end as well. Really, when you're making books, I find that it's preparing the paper and preparing the book board and getting everything ready that takes the largest amount of time. So while you're getting your paper ready, maybe you want to look at one of my other snazzy videos, and that will help you pass the time with a little bit more information about books that I'm sharing. We finally have our paper ready to go. The next thing we want to do is fold it in half to create our sections. So it's important that you do not fold each sheet of paper individually, but that you fold them as a stack, as a section of pages. I'm going to do 3 pages in one section. I'm going to use my bone folder, which I may have forgotten to mention earlier, to help me do my folding. So take each section, fold them at once, not individually, because we want to make sure that they fit nicely together as a group of pages in our book. And then take your bone folder. This one comes from the lovely Martha Stewart. And there you have a set of pages. So you want to do that for each group of pages that you have. Each section is what they're called. Bone folder is going to help you get a really nice solid crease in that group of pages. Again, it's always good to just double check that you've got 3 pages per section, not more, not less. I often like to play around with my paper. I'll sometimes insert, you know, those overlay pages that I showed you in the sketchbooks that I have. Those are a lot of fun to put into a sketchbook. Or, you know, I'll also just use papers that I happen to have around. You know, as an artist, you end up collecting stuff, and this is a good way to use up maybe excess paper that you have in the studio, make a really nice quality sketchbook. So the next thing you need to do is kind of interweave these papers. I put fold to fold so that I can press them and get them sitting nice and flat before I start stitching up my book. So the best way to flatten your pages to make them sit really nicely together is to use a book press. But unfortunately, I don't have a book press, so I'm going to use my snazzy art history books. So what I've got is this bucket of lovely art history books that weigh quite a bit of weight. And these are all lovely books that you should own and read, much like Art in Theory, yes, 1900 to 2000, Chicago manual style for writing papers. Baroque tapestries, Pompeii, super exciting, and this lovely history of the print in the Western world. Now what we can do is let our pages sit, settle down, fold nicely together, and then we'll come back a bit later and sew up the pages. Okay everyone, welcome back. The pages have been resting for a little while, so they're pretty well flattened here. My set of 5 sections of book pages. So what I need to do is to get ready to sew up my text block. What I need is a piece of cardboard. So you take that piece of cardboard and then you cut these 2 divots in it, and then you fold it in half. So it can be like this. So really what this does is to create something that the book itself can lie in, so that you're able to punch holes that will allow you to sew up the book. So these other sheets, other pieces of cardboard are meant to go into those slots so that this book cradle will stand up and you can lay your book into it and poke holes and not run into something hard like a table or whatever. The other thing that we need besides the book cradle is a guide that will be going into your book, but it has to be the length of your spine. So you can see from this one, this is a guide to help me punch my holes in each section of my books, so that I get my holes in the proper place for every single section that I produce. So what I need to do is, since this one is too big, is to make my own, because I don't believe I've ever made a book that's exactly this size. So I first measure the length of the spine. So this is 8 3/4. So for you, you might have a different size, but for me, would be 8 3/4. So I'm going to take my X-Acto blade and cut down a new piece of mat board that is that size. What I'm making is a guide for punching my holes in my book so that I can sew up the text block. So I've cut this to the proper size of my spine of my book. And what I'm doing is creating these little divots that I can then punch my awl through in each section of pages. So I've measured it out so that on each end there's 1 inch, and then in between there's 1 1/8 inch. So then I'm going to take my X-Acto knife and cut little areas where I can fit my awl through when I punch those holes. You can see here I'm just making a little triangle in there. And so that's ensuring that each section of pages has that hole poked through in the proper spot, so that when I go to sew up the binding of the book, I can get a nice tight sewing and the book will hold together very well and be straight. Alright, so I've got that ready. Now I'm going to go over to my book cradle, and I've got a section of pages here. I'm going to open those up, lay them in the book cradle, and stick my spine piece in there, and then punch the holes straight through where that crease is that I folded to create that section of pages. And you can see I can poke my awl through without, you know, running into a table or anything like that. I've got my holes punched there, as you can see. So I'll do that with each section of pages that I have. So I've got the holes punched in all of my 5 sections of pages. I don't need the book cradle anymore. I'll put that aside. Use it another time when I want to make another book. I'm done with the awl. Put that aside. And also I'm done with this guide that I was using. So now I want to grab some thread, decide if I want color. Color doesn't really matter because we're going to be casing our book in. How about black? So when you pull out your thread, this is waxed, so it's waxed thread, so it's going to be sticking in there a bit. You have 5 sections. I basically want to pull out, you know, the length of the spine, probably plus 1 or 1.5 extra. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.5 is probably a good amount. Cut that. And then grab your curved needle. This is sometimes a little bit of a challenge. You can flatten one edge as well as you can and get that needle threaded up. So now I'm ready to sew. Got my needle ready to go. I'm going to pick up my first section of pages. I'm going to go from the outside of the book to the inside. I want to make sure I've got the 3 pages together and getting through that first hole there on the end. When I thread the needle, notice I don't tie it. I've seen students do that and that causes problems. You want to make sure that the wax isn't gonna get caught on your pages or anything. You also don't want to tie it on the end. You're just gonna leave a tail and just make sure that you watch that you don't accidentally pull it all the way through. So when you get to the inside of the pages, you're gonna go all the way down to the end hole on that first section. So all those are empty. You came through the first one down here. You're gonna go out this top one out up here. So if you're talking book speak, these holes are called stations, but I'm gonna make it easier on you by calling them holes. So once you're on the outside, you're gonna pick up the second section of pages here. So there you've got the pages next to each other. This is the first section, second section. You're gonna go in the hole that's right next to the one that you came out of from the first section over to the second. So you see that? So you have to find a way to figure out what's best in terms of how to handle the pages, because they can be somewhat large, depending on what size of book you're producing. So I tried to hold the 2 middle parts together so that I can see the insides at once. I've got that long stitch on the one side, and then I'm coming through the one on the other here. I pull that through, make sure that I don't lose my tail on the other side there. Then I just go down 1 hole on the inside of the second section of pages and out again. Pull, try to keep things tight. So I've got 1 stitch in there, and now I'm going to go to the outside, and I've got the spine. I'm going to go through the first section of those pages again, but I want to make sure that I don't sever that middle thread that I put down the middle of the spine of the piece there, of the paper, I mean.
So I went through, I'm on one side of that long thread. Then the key to this is to go over the top of that long thread, if you can see there, and back out again. I've gone over the top of that long thread, one stitch, basically in through one hole and back out the very same hole. I have one little stitch tying in that long thread in the first section. And then I've come to the outside of the second section. And inside the second section, I have one little stitch across, making sure my tail is tight as well here. And then I'm going to go through to the second section, that same hole that I came, out of from before. So I'm going to have basically 2 stitches across right there. All right, so now I'm going to the inside of the second section with my needle here. And then down 1 stitch and out. I'm on the outside, of the book again, and then going across to the first section where I have the long stitch, remember, and you don't want to sever that. So you're going to one side of it. There it is there. I'm on one side. And then I'm gonna go, basically I'm on one side, I'm gonna go across over to the other side and out the same hole that I came through. And basically just tying in that long thread there. You can see that. Back to the outside again. And then over to create another like double stitch across on that second hole. Back into the next set of pages, the second section. Pull that tight, make sure my tail is still there. And then down 1 more stitch. So I've got 1, 2, I'm down to 3. So I have to say it takes a little bit of hand strength to hold, the pages in place as you're stitching down, at least until you get these first 2 sections together. So just try your best to keep it tight and hold the 2 groups of pages still and in line with each other. So I'm repeating this process. Again, over to the first section, across the long stitch, back out the same hole again. I'm on the other side of the spine there, on the outside. I'm creating, again, a double stitch. Back into the inside of the second section of pages, pulling my thread. So I'm working my way down to the end of the book. I'm on the inside of the second section of pages, going 1 more stitch down, over to the outside, stitch across the spine there, to the first section. Don't sever the long thread in the middle. Pull it through. Back to the outside again. Double stitch across. And now I'm out to the last hole, and then I've stitched all the way across in the second section of pages, which is stitch by stitch there. And then on the other side is the long stitch with things that have gone over to sort of tie it in. Now I'm on the outside, I've got my tail, and now I'm gonna just create a double knot to tie it off. And since the wax is there with the thread, it'll help it to just really lock in nicely. And so you can be sure that it's not going to come undone and your book will be solidly together. So from this point forward, it's going to get a lot easier to add in the next section of pages. So first two, now I'm going to add the third section of pages, and this is where my link stitch is going to start up. And what I like to do is to try to find, you know, a spot at the edge of the table where I can open up the pages and have control over what I'm doing to make sure that they're still sewn tightly together. So I'm on the outside at the end of the third section of pages, going to the inside here. And then I'm gonna find a way to hold things together, pull that through, go one stitch down to the next hole there, as you can see, and out. And this is also gonna be where your needle is going to become more useful with it being curved. So what you do with the link stitch is that you take the curved needle and you go underneath and between the previous two sections of pages. Do you see that there? And so what I'm doing is linking around that previous stitching that I put there. And then it's underneath, and then I'm gonna go back through the very same hole that I came out of, as you can see there. And that creates a link from one section of pages down to the other that I already sewed. So now I'm on the inside, and then I go down one more hole and back out again. So I'm balancing on the edge of my table with my hand, and then I link underneath there again, like I did before, as you can see. Pull that through, and then go back through the same hole that I came out of, like I mentioned. So in essence, you know, once I get this down, this process repeats itself, and you'll get the hang of it. So what I could essentially do is add as many sections of pages as I want to make it, you know, as thick as an encyclopedia or a dictionary or something if I wanted to. But that's essentially how most books are put together, whether or not they're done by machine or done by hand. So I'm on the outside, I'm linking underneath again, working my way down to the other end of the book. Down one more and out. Link underneath. So I'll finish this up to the end of this section, and then I'll try to speed up time a little bit for you so that you don't have to sit through me sewing together the entire book, because you get the hang of it.
So I'm linking underneath again, back through the same hole that I came out of. And then when I get to the end, I'll kind of do a combination of a link stitch as well as go back up to add the next section of pages. So final stitch to the outside here in the third section of pages. Now I link underneath in between those two pages. And I keep the thread loose. I've linked underneath that section of pages. And then what I'm going to do is just take my needle back through that same loop, pull it up, and that creates kind of a bit of a loop knot. And then I can grab my next section of pages and add it on. So I can continuously do this however many number of pages that I have. And so as I go through the fourth section of pages, and then I'm going to, again, repeat the process, but go down the length of the book the other way. But when I link through, this time I'm going to link through just the previous two sections of pages. So as I work it, that link stitch is going to build up a thickness in my book that will become the thickness of my spine.
So this is the part in class where I'd be slowly, sewing through the book and trying to be as entertaining as possible, which isn't always easy. So I would tend to tell, cheesy jokes like math jokes, because art students tend to not like math, so I just think it's kind of funny. So what do you call a group of dudes who love math? Algebros. And why should you never start a conversation with pi? Because it'll go on and on forever, just like your professor. Haha. So why did the student feel like life was pointless? Because she didn't take geometry yet. So anyway, try to be entertaining as you're sewing your book, or maybe just, watch some Netflix or something, which I would love to show you just now. But there we are, making it through the book and stitching it up really nicely.
All right, I've now come down to the final end of my book. So I'm on the outside. I've got it tightly sewn up, and then I just want to tie off by looping underneath like I did before and going back through that loop. So pull that tight. I'll do that twice. And that will create a nice double knot there on the end of my book. Then trim the tail. I generally trim it to the end, and then when I glue it up, I can make that hide in between the pages. Trim the other end as well. And then I've got my book sewn up. Then I want to go back to my lovely art history books and weight the book down again overnight. Make sure the whole thing gets under an even weight. And that will get the book sitting nicely together, we're good for now.